This is Parasha Talk Shalom. I am Rabbi Elliot Malamet, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemen, and joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, New York City. We're recording this, I think it's day 27 of the war, and we are thinking about the hostages. We're thinking about hostages that are close to the Ramah community, and the Schechter community, Omer, Neutra, Hersh, Goldber-Polin, and of course all the 240 hostages. We dedicate our study to them, and understanding that study of the Torah is a kind of sanctuary for us. And we put a little footnote that Rabbi Barry Chesler is celebrating his birthday today, so Mazel Tov, Barry.
Thank you.
On your birthday. We'll leave out the number. We are studying Parasha Vayera. Vayera is, I haven't said this in a while, it's an amazing Parsha. It's an amazing Parsha because really there's so many things that go on in this Parsha, namely at the beginning of the Parsha, the visit of the three visitors to Abraham. He's recovering from surgery, very intimate kind of surgery. He's recovering, Kechom Hayom, at the heat of the day. They visit him, and they have some news for him. The news is that in about a year, his wife, Sarah, is going to have a baby, and she's listening from the inside, and she laughs, and that laughter prompts a kind of conversation between God and Abraham and Sarah. And each one kind of tries to figure out and to tell their own perspective of this. But it is a bit of a joke that she's going to be turning 90, Abraham's 100. And at the very least, she questions whether or not he will be able to become a father. And she doesn't think that she would become a mother. But God is capable of doing amazing things, and so the news is given. And here's what I want to focus on: Abraham departs with his visitors, and this is chapter 18, verse. We're going to start with verse 16. Vayakumu mishama anashim. So he's leaving with the people, right? Nice hospitality etiquette here, that Abraham is kind of escorting his visitors with them. And then Vayashkifu al Pnei Sodom, which is a lovely way that the Torah is telling us something is going to happen. They're looking out at the Sodom. And so I think what the Torah is trying to do for us here is put us on the top, on the plateau, because Sodom is a city that is low. It's on the edge of the Dead Sea, depending on which map you look at. It's either at the top of the Dead Sea or at the side of the Dead Sea, that is to say, on the Israel side of the Dead Sea. Okay, so Abraham is walking with them to kind of send them off. All right, we're going to study this verse by verse and see what we come up. So, any comments on that first verse? Anything? I'm just saying this is a nice opening of a story that gives us a kind of mental picture of a plateau, a view, and also I think a nice kind of exemplar of hospitality. Right? There is this piece of etiquette that when a person visits you, you walk out a little bit, right?
Well, it is kind of curious because the last time Abraham looked at Sodom and Gomorrah, at least in the Torah, was when Lot chose it for his inheritance, leaving the rest of the land to Abraham. And it's described as being as well watered as the Garden of Egypt.
Yeah.
Now, we have to ask ourselves, what does Abraham know about these men that he's accompanying? They gave him some news. Does he think they're going to give some news to Sodom?
Great question. I don't know. my sense is that they have some kind of they're visiting. I mean, does he know that they have a mission?
Well, I don't know.
You don't know.
I think you could probably read it both ways.
I
mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, the fact that there's an augur of birth. I mean, those three guys didn't come and say, we're traveling shoe salesmen here. I mean, they gave him a message from heaven, so he has to know that he got a message from God before, and Vayomer Adonai el Abraham, lama zeh tzachaka Sarah. God was speaking to him it depends on how you interpret it, right? In the one way to do it is he was talking to God, and then the three men showed up. So he stopped talking to God and then took care of the three men and then continued to talk to God. Or the more sensible thing seems to be that they are angelic messengers from the divine, and he is speaking into the divine realm through them. And so therefore stands to reason that the character Abraham in this story knows that something else real important is happening.
But this is
and he also, I think, then it kind of sets up the next verse.
I agree. So good. It just it gives you that sense of why are they looking at it? That's probably
there's a sense of, I think it introduces a sense of foreboding.
Okay.
That something is going to happen, and then that's why God says in the next verse, shall I hide from Abraham? Shall I leave him in suspense? Shall I wait until he sees what I am going to do? Or shall I just tell him right now what's going on?
Interesting. So Vayomer Adonai, Vayomer
Adonai
Amar Hamichaseh, and the word embedded in Michaseh is kisui, which you said is to cover or to hide, right? I'm gonna cover up something from Avraham, right? So take us into the mind of God then here. What's
Well, the first thing, there's a small grammatical point.
Yes.
Our readers might know, if you look, if our readers happen to be looking at verse 16, it's Vayakumu Misham Vayashkifu Apne Sodom. When this is called the conversive vav, it's a consecutive bunch of verbs, and this happened and that happened, and it's called the conversive because it takes what looks like a future tense verb, makes it a past, or takes a past tense verb, makes it future. But when the sequence of consecutive verbs, vayomer, vayomer, vayelech, vayakum, vayelech, etc., is broken with a thing where the subject precedes the verb. In biblical Hebrew, typically the verb precedes the subject, vayomer Adonai. But when the subject precedes the verb, it arrests the action and stops. So you're going to read it like this: Vayakumu misham anashim vayashkifu apnei Sodom. The people get up and they're gazing towards Sodom. The Avraham holech imam l'shalcham. As Abraham is walking, it's not and then Abraham walked. Vadonai Amar, God having said, God has already sort of said this, quote unquote, to God's self. It's not the next thing that happens. It's the condition under which this whole story is being told. That God's idea is, things work out well when I consult with my human partners. Okay, Abraham's a special person. We have a covenant. I'm really invested in him and his family. And verse 18, which is 18 is important, and 19 is
go ahead, read 18 and 19.
Okay, I'm going to read 18 and 19 because 19 is the kicker verse.
Yeah.
Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Avraham hayo yehiyeh legoy gadol ve'atzum, because I have promised that I know, and this is the plan, that Abraham is going to be a great and mighty nation. V'nivrchu bo kol goyei haaretz, and all the families of the earth will be blessed by knowing him, or by his presence in his life. And here's in verse 19, to me, one of the central verses when we think about ourselves as Jews. What should we be trying to be? What should we be trying to do? God says, Ki yadativ. Our JPS translation has, I have singled him out, which is fine, but it could be a little simpler. I know him. Yadativ, ani yadati oto. Leman asher yitzaveh et banav vet beito acharav. I entered this covenant with him so that he would command his progeny and his household. V'shamru derech Adonai la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat, and they'll keep the way of the Lord and do righteousness and justice. L'man hevi Adonai al Abraham et asher diber alav. And when that happens, then God will be able to bestow all those blessings of Abraham's grandeur. So to me, when I say that pasuk, that verse, I feel that the point of God entering this conversation is educational and aspirational for Abraham to be a character of keeping the way of the Lord and doing righteousness and justice, as he is about to do.
Interesting. I want to stop just at Yedativ. I like the possibility of multiple interpretations of that word as chosen and as I know him, and this speaks to the relationship that throughout the stories of Abraham, it's really about the building of that relationship. God has a relationship with Abraham, and maybe this is God kind of is not only revealing something about himself, a thought to Abraham, there is also a revelation of something to us as readers. It's a kind of double entendre. Hamachaseh ani me Abraham, have I hidden anything from from Abraham? But I've also hidden something from the reader. I've hidden why I chose him in the first place. Because we have some interesting things about him, but there's been never been a definitive answer. Why did you choose him? Yeah.
So what I think we have here is a kind of divine transparency.
Okay.
Because a divine transparency. We have to think about where Abraham is in the scope of Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis. God was not all that intimately involved with Adam. He did not really teach him anything. He put him in a garden, gave him a rule, which Adam managed to break, and he kicked him out, and the generations descended. Even though Noach is described as Zisadik B'Doratav, a righteous person in his generation, God also does not teach him anything. He tells him, build a boat, save yourself and your family, and he gets off the boat. The world repopulates itself with animals and presumably vegetation as well, and things go downhill. And now, it's the third time is a charm. God knows that he needs Abraham, that in order for this venture of human beings to work, there has to be justice in the world. That's what's been missing. People have been left to themselves. They've had no standard that they've been taught that this is how you're supposed to live your life. They've lived it poorly, at least according to the Torah. And now God's plan is different because Abraham is singled out to be the banner of justice. And this, I think, is why God has to tell him what he's going to do. Because we have to imagine what would happen if God said nothing to Abraham, and Abraham woke up one day, looked out at the plain of where Sodom and Gomorrah was, and saw total destruction. He would conclude that God is not trustworthy. Because how could it be that a place was so bad that no one was worth saving?
Okay.
It's hard for human beings to imagine such a place.
So let's go on to the next verse, which is 20. Vayomer Adonai, God says, and it doesn't say to whom God says, just Vayomer Adonai. Za'akat Sodom va'amorah ki rabah. The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, how great it is. V'chatatam, and their sin, ki chavda me'od, how very heavy it is.
So a question, since we were talking about grammar before, how are we supposed to understand chatatam? Is it that there's one big sin that everyone in Sodom and Gomorrah embrace? Or is it the accumulation of everyone's individual sins, which then would be chatotehem?
So it's chatatam, right?
Right. So are we to assume there's really only one sin that plagues, as it were, Sodom and Gomorrah?
Their sin singular. You're pointing out that grammatically speaking, their sin is in a singular.
Right. So how are we to understand that?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that.
Well, that's because we're reading it line by line. All these things come
it's possible that there are words in the Bible and in English too, right? Like one fish and 30 fish, one deer and 30 deer. We use the same word for single and plural. And there are words in Hebrew like mayim and damim that are plural, and we use it for any amount because water or blood is always going to be a plural, dam and damim. Is it possible that chet is like that their sin is the category of sinfulness as opposed to stealing on this day and beating on that day and lying on that day?
I have Nachum Sarna here. The sin of Sodom is the heinous moral and social corruption, an arrogant disregard of basic human rights, a cynical insensitivity to the sufferings of others. He builds it on a whole essay of different proof texts, and on it goes. So it's one big sin that's made up of all sorts of little sins or all sorts of major sins.
Well, it's like you said that you used that word corruption, which is a singular noun.
Yes.
That means the general state of being rotten.
Exactly. So corruption is defined by everybody doing acts of corruption. So it's all under one umbrella. So one terrible, terrible sin. It's
in the next pasuk.
Go ahead.
In the next pasuk, well, first of all, one of the things which we could talk about, but I think we'll maybe leave it to the side for the moment, is that this is another one of those stories where God is not portrayed in his Maimonidean splendid isolation of knowing everything, of being omniscient. God says, "Well, I gotta go check it out." Erdana ve'ereh, and let me go down and check out ha kitza'akata haba'a elai asukala. Let me go check out. Is it true that they are all as fully wicked as the cry would indicate? Or if not, I'll know that too. But
give me your translation there. You have the JPS in front of you, or
I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me, and if not, I will take note. That's the JPS. I just want to just tell a little midrash, which I think is cool. Ha kitza'akata. Is it the case? The ha is the question mark particle. Kitza'akata, like her cry, and city is a female word and a feminine word in Hebrew, so it's like the cry of that city. But there's a little mapik hey, the little direct object in the last letter hey with a little dot inside the hey. There's a direct object marker. So is it, or I guess it's not exactly a direct object. It's an object marker. Is it like her cry? I think Pshat is the city cry, but there's a midrash that Sodom was such a terrible place that they forbade people to give tzedakah, and there was this. So now in this midrash, her cry refers to the cry of a young girl whose heart was moved to sympathy, and she gave tzedakah, she gave bread to a hungry person, and the city was so incensed with her violation of their norms that they tortured her to death. So it's a really gross little story. They smear her in honey and they let the bees sting her to death. And so the her cry is given a particularly poignant image of the anti-Jews. The anti-Israelites are the people who refuse to give tzedakah, and they're even mad when other people give tzedakah. And we implicitly are the opposite people who are like, our cities are all about tzedakah.
So he goes down, and then it says, or he declares that he's going to go down. Vayifnu misham hanashim. The people that he's with turn from him. Vayilchu Sodoma va'Avraham odeno omeid lifnei Adonai. And this is really the great stage the narrator is being very clever here. The narrator has set up this encounter, right? That God and Abraham are going to have a conversation. The people turned from there and then went to Sodom, and Abraham was still standing before God. Okay, and then.
But I just want to add one point here: is that just as God seems oblivious to what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah until now, so is Abraham.
Yeah.
And so this is a teachable moment. God is instructing Abraham that his locus of concern has to be wider than he thinks.
Yeah.
But even though he's in his place in Eretz Israel, he has to be concerned with what goes on elsewhere.
Yeah.
And he has to follow God in that.
Okay, so then we'll go to the next verse here. Vayigash Abraham, Abraham comes over, Vayomer, and he said, Vayomar, and he says, Haf tispeh tzadiki mashav. This is one of the most famous lines in the entire Bible. Are you going to annihilate the virtuous with the wicked? Ulai yesh 50 tzadikim. Maybe there are 50 people, 50 righteous people in the middle of the city. Ha'af tispeh, are you going to destroy it? Will you annihilate it and not sustain the place for the 50 virtuous who are in it? So take me into, how what's going through Abraham's mind here? And what does he want to do here with God?
I would say that Abraham is filled with compassion. And it's unbearable to think that innocent people might be swept away with guilty people. And therefore, it's preferable, even if it is close to unbearable, to let the guilty survive in order to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of, did we do one of our sessions before Rosh Hashanah on the Unetana Toka? Maybe we did. Did we? I don't remember.
I think last year.
The that metaphor, of the three books, one for the holy righteous, one for the holy wicked, one for the Benoniim, for the medium people. The holy righteous described the way for life, and the holy wicked described immediately for death, and everyone else is in the middle. Presumably that's 100% of people. B'Rosh Hashanah yichatevu, u'b'Yom Tzom Kippur yichatemu. On Rosh Hashanah it's written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed. But then it goes on and says, Ad Yom Moto Tichakelo. You actually, so the meaning of that poem would be something like this. Really, you got to make your tshuva tefillah tzedakah now, because you have 1 week until Yom Kippur, 10 days until Yom Kippur. But then the poem goes on and says, actually, you have until the day of your death. So I think that the Ad Yom Moto Tichakelo, in which case I think that the vibe would be something like, listen, rarely and occasionally, people are totally wicked and you give up on them. But everybody else is in the middle and they're not given up on, and they're given a chance to continue to work to improve. So to Barry's observation, it would seem to me that the thing that may be going on here is something like that. I have to go check out if stone is completely worthless and completely beyond saving, or it's not that I'm going to let the people go, but it's I'm going to keep waiting for them, because they still have enough, juice in them that they might get better. And I think that the dynamic that we're going to talk about, but the numbers, is whether there remains some critical mass that might be decent enough that makes it worth waiting for.
Is the question about people, or is it the question about the city? I read to you before we started recording this comment by Yonatan Grossman, an important scholar in Israel, who says the focus here is on the city, and throughout the conversation it's about the city and the city. And even in the preamble to this conversation, or to the argument between Abraham and God, it's about the city, the cry of the city, Zakat Sodom V'Amorah, the cry of these two cities. So it's like, New York City. It's like, and when you think of the city, the whole city is destroyed, or Jeremy Q, a Bruce Springsteen song, "My City's in Ruins," right? And what is he saying? In the song he's saying it's about the whole city. It's about the whole city is broken, right? And I mean, it's the city has boundary. The city has a certain kind of geographical entity, but it's also a symbol of something. I mean, no, is it people or the city? That's what I'm thinking.
What would it mean if it were the city? Like it was like Nigei Habayit? Is it like the stones
Yeah,
are somehow corrupt?
it's like this whole city is terrible, right? Look, I don't want
So it's a fascinating idea and demands more thought than we could give it in a few minutes. But I don't know that we can actually separate the city from the people in the city, that they are regarded as one. You cannot destroy the city without destroying the people. I had opportunity in the class, I guess last week, to mention one of the great disgusting things of all time, which is the neutron bomb, right? A bomb that was designed to kill people but leave the buildings intact, so you don't have to rebuild so much after the war is over.
Yeah.
But here, I think when you destroy the city, you're going to destroy the people. And if all the people are destroyed, the city goes with it. Because the city is not buildings, it's people.
I have to concur with this. I don't think that what's being said here, if it's the place derivatively because it's been so defiled by the people's immorality. And I concur with Barry about this, that like, what happens with the Lot episode? I mean, is it like, what's the metaphor? Is it toxic waste, which is what's wrong with the city, or is it immoral behavior, which is what's wrong with the people? And maybe there's some slippage that the immoral behavior creates, so to speak, toxic waste.
I want to add one more point, Elliot, if I might, and that is that we also have to keep in mind that Sodom and Gomorrah physically kind of lives on in the land around the Dead Sea, which is visible throughout the generations. So that sign of destruction of the place lasts longer than the sign of the destruction of the people. And that may be why the place is emphasized.
All right. So I just want to, illustrate this with the point that, destroyed cities, take Hiroshima or take Warsaw, for example. A Jew doesn't go to Warsaw without thinking about the Warsaw Ghetto. Now, the Warsaw Ghetto area was completely plowed over and destroyed, but rebuilt. But you can't walk in there without feeling the ghosts and feeling something. I've never been to Japan. I've never been to Hiroshima, but you can't even say the word without thinking about the atomic bomb. And so the city has a meaning, that the name of the city has a meaning, and the name of the city, we still use it in our language today, Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, the names of the city become symbolic for such terrible evil and such total destruction. And then they were never rebuilt. Sodom and Gomorrah were never rebuilt, but there's somehow they have this mythical presence in the erased cities. They're
the way you're saying it now is resonant, but I think it remains like it is the symbol of a holy, WHOLLY, worthless, corrupt site of evil. And that is because of the selfishness and cruelty. And, I recently was having a conversation with a bat mitzvah kid about, mitzvot. And mitzvot, why do we call, adolescent children b'nei mitzvah, that they're subject to the commandments? Because we want to build you up in a set of behaviors that will make you a more virtuous person, a more honest, a more giving, a more tender, a more caring, a more loving, more just person. And I said to her, like, if I tell you these are all these mitzvot that we expect of you, to be a certain kind of person, but if I tell you, listen, this is a dog eat dog world out there, do unto others before they do to you, and you get ahead and don't let anybody eat your lunch, that's just going to produce a different kind of person. So Sodom is that place that says, do unto others before they do to you. You look out for number one. Don't let anybody get ahead of you. Fight like a dog. And look what they have. That's the legacy that they have. They are a symbol of that. But I'm resisting the thought that that's more than a powerful metaphor for the wickedness of the people.
Look, we're I hesitate to even go here, but I'll go there just because we have no time left. Which is, so we're witnessing now a war that's playing out in real time, where there's real destruction, and of course all of the issues that Abraham raises about the death of innocence and shall the virtue annihilate the virtue of the wicked, and all of that discussion, which is part of a larger ethical conversation about what collateral damage is in war, and that's so complicated here in this context. But I'll just talk about the way that the name Gaza City has already placed itself in the Jewish imagination, Israeli imagination, as a place that is a warren of evil. There's an underground city of tunnels where tens of thousands of people are just waiting to kill, and that there are hostages there, and that this is what it's become a symbol. In a way it always has been a symbol, or from a certain time has become a symbol of an impossible place. And I guess the sense that there's destruction going on here, and it's the city will never be the same, certainly, the way that cities are not the same after they experience tremendous destruction. That's probably as close as we can get to this whole conversation on this, which is just fine, I guess.
So difficult to talk about in every way.
But we're thinking about everybody there. We're thinking about certainly people on the front line, people who are, lots of graduates of our various schools in Ramah, friends of ours, and people that we know. I know, and we talked about it last week when we were thinking about them. And so we'll end with a prayer that the hostages who are being held, may they be free, and may they be freed soon, and may God strengthen the hands of the defenders of Israel, and may God continue to bring a sense of recovery, a sense of possibility, and a sense of hope to all of us and to all of Klal Yisrael during this, I think, a very, very challenging time, to comfort the bereaved of the house of Israel. Hamakom Yenachem, all of them. May God comfort them, and this may study of the Torah provide a window into the possibility of comfort, the possibility we can have comfort. And we'll see you all next week on another edition of Parasha Talk.
Shabbat Shalom.